So I'm joined by the legend, the icon, IMAKEMADBEATS. Matt is a musician, producer. He's the founder of Unapologetic, and he is a movement maker. I've been a big fan of your creative vision for a long time.
Yeah.
The way you merge your music and fashion and surrounding yourself with creative people. So I just had to have you on the show. So thanks for joining me.
It's an honor, man. It's truly an honor, for real.
Good.
Yeah.
So, I'll talk about that vision.
Yeah.
And, you have this recording studio, you have a fashion line, and a creative agency and label.
Yeah.
Where do you think that drive and vision comes from? What motivates you to create?
I think it first starts with like trying to fit in and you don't, right? A lot of people mistake it. They just think that you're just so bold and different and you're just daring to do things differently. The truth of it is that you tried to not do it differently. You just got rejected. You know what I'm saying? You tried to fold into everybody else and how they did it, and it didn't work. And so one day, just out of options, you just were yourself, and it worked out, and people appreciated the authenticity and the sincerity. And then you're like, oh, man, well, how many different ways can this show up, right? I dress differently. I have different ideas of the kinds of phrases I want on T-shirts, and my music has always been the foundation of everything. But at some point you realize, like, wow, I'm actually just a creative. I kind of do whatever. I have the kind of mind to strategize and make most of my ideas come to life in some kind of way. And so let's just explore, see what happens.
Talking about ideas, when you get an idea that pops in your head, what is usually your next step? How do you bring that idea to life?
So I get an idea and I'm like a reverse engineer connoisseur. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a gift of mine. So I also have a degree in computer science. So I'm a programmer.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, you have the app.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I programmed the app.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've been programming since 9th grade.
Wow.
And so to have an idea of a program, right? And then to write the steps and then to write the code, right? And then the opposite, which is to see a program already created, right? And then try to emulate it through code, right? Or back in the day, what we used to do on MySpace, we used to right click, you know what I'm saying, and get the HTML.
That's how I learned.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like, that's reverse engineering. You're seeing the matrix behind what you're seeing. And so, I have exercised that muscle to oblivion. And so generally, as soon as I get an idea, I just begin to put the pieces together, kind of reverse engineer the steps necessary. Also, something that I do that I think I've been told is quite different is I think most people, they draw the diagram as to how their idea will come together. Mm-hmm. I also draw the diagram of what would stop my idea from coming together. So I like to name my demons just as well as to name my angels.
Yeah.
Right? So that I can be prepared for them and know how to mitigate them.
And what are some of these demons that you've faced? Like, what are some of creative roadblocks that you've come across?
Yeah. I think the very first is not doing what's necessary to surround yourself with the right people. Mm-hmm. So, for example, there was a time where every idea I had, when I said it out loud, somebody thought, man, that man's crazy. He's passionate, yo. Like, he's hey, man, good luck, bruh. You know what I'm saying? And now, if I were to say, I want to do a cartwheel off of a helicopter, parachute onto the top of the pyramid, and then slide down the side of it on a towel, right? Kid Maestro is going to tell me the rental costs for helicopters off him is going to bring me a few variations of towels, and that's the kind of people you want around you. Right?
Yeah.
You want those. So I think that was like the first hurdle in the scheme of big ideas, because big ideas need community, right?
Yes.
Regular size ideas might just need you, But big ideas, you need more hands, you need more minds, you know, and you need more people to help you carry it out. And you want those people to be people who are excited about your ideas. So I think that once I tackled that demon as like, oh no, wait a minute, I'm not doing any of my ideas justice if I don't find the right hands to share it with. I think everything else changed after that.
What you've built is so amazing with Unapologetic. What motivated you to create that, and how have you seen it grown?
Yeah. Well, you know, shout out to this year. This year, Unapologetic turns 10.
Wow.
So in August, we celebrate 10 years.
You're going to have a big birthday party?
Yeah, we are, you know.
It's going to be at the pyramid at the top right. You're all going to come. Yeah, got you.
The towels, you know what I'm saying? Everything. Yeah, you know, it's, because it's year 10, I've thought a lot about everything I've learned to get here and even what made me start it. So, you know, I'm from Memphis. You from Memphis?
No, I'm originally from Tupelo, Mississippi.
Okay.
I moved
You
here in
from down the block, though?
2017.
Yeah. Okay. You from down the block, though.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm from Memphis. I've come across, I understand how, when someone says it's hard to be different here, I don't think you'll find somebody who understands that more than me. Because, you know, I spent a lot of time traveling as a kid, and sometimes it can be tough to not be, you know, immediately recognizable right here. You know, I think that's changed a bit over the years. Like now we're much better, you know, but 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you know, doing things different. I'm a recording engineer and a producer. So before I started Unapologetic, I spoke to hundreds of young artists in the city, usually one-on-one in my studio right before or after a session. I can't tell you how many people I met who were like, man, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but man, if you're not just right down the middle trap or R&B or whatever, it's hard to get that much support here. It's hard to do X, Y, and Z here. That's why I got to go to LA. That's why I got to go to Atlanta. That's why I got to go to New York. You know, and so many people told me this, and then they would always finish that statement with like, yeah, I know it's just me. Nobody else really feels like that except for me. And I'm like, that's a lie. I've talked to so many people who feel I feel the exact same way, you know. The kind of like pothole that I kept seeing was that people would make things that was different, right? And they would be daring, they would push the envelope. And we've never had a problem with creating people who would push the envelope, right? But when people wouldn't understand it, people would feel rejected, and then they would just go to a city that already has an understanding for that kind of music. I found that the pothole is like, wait a minute. You kind of have to build the world that explains what you created, right? So for example, you know, I go back to like me coming up and listening to new artists, you know. Stone's Throw Records explained Madlib. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like Warped explains Flying Lotus, right? Rockefeller explained Kanye West and, you know, Beans and Jay, right? It made sense under that umbrella, right? And so if you can create the world, that might help people understand the things that come out of that world.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, it was like, all right, cool. Well, what's my world? My world is all about being boldly, daringly, and unapologetically yourself. Right? In a way that inspires others to do the same. So if I wanted to put out music that I knew was different here, my own music, and then I wanted to be able to put out a Cameron Bethany and the Offham, you know what I'm saying, and whoever else, and Mono Neon, you know what I'm saying? Like, I need to create something that can fit all of that makes all of that make sense together. And that's how we started Unapologetic.
How would you sum up what it takes to be an unapologetic artist?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like, our genre is sincerity and vulnerability. I don't care what instrument you play. I don't care what you say your genre is. This is why we house all the way from like country folk, indie folk, all the way to like punk rap,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in terms of artists, right? We have instrumental producers, we have, you know, we have it all, you know. And the only thing I require of an artist underneath the unapologetic fold is that you are willing to daringly be vulnerable and sincere, right? If you want to tell a safe story that is easy to tell because it's so safe, there's another place for you. That's not here. But here, people will see the things that they go through that they are afraid to talk about in you. And you are dedicated to telling that story.
I watched your TEDx, and in the vein of being vulnerable, I related to it because I was nervous for this interview. You know, I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna fuck something up. But you know, watching your TEDx and how you talked about your father and being in recovery meetings, I related to that 100%. Through that process of creating that TEDx, did you learn anything new about yourself?
Okay, so there's two things. First and foremost, like, that's the very first time that TED Talk, that was the very first time I said those things publicly, right? So I started Unapologetic. I'm the leader of Unapologetic. I take leadership very seriously. So that means I have to hold myself to the same standards that this company is holding everyone else, right? So when I sat down to write my TED Talk, by the 6th or 7th time, it didn't make me uncomfortable enough, right? Like I didn't feel like I was daring myself to push myself to the next level of vulnerability and sincerity. So, you know, when I started off saying I'm nervous as hell, like, that's me admitting the vulnerability of the moment. But a lot of the things that I talked about regarding my dad, my family, the things I had gone through, these are things that we kept secret, you know. Days before my TED Talk, before I actually went and did the TED Talk, I had a great conversation with my dad. And I told him, I said, Dad, I'm about to talk about stuff from my childhood I ain't never talked about, and it involves you, you know. And I just feel like it's important to express this. And he said, well, it's your story too. You can tell your story. That was freeing, but it still made me very nervous to be that sincere and vulnerable about some of the darkest moments of my childhood and my life. So what did I learn about myself? I just learned, I'll never forget this too. We're musicians. We perform in front of crowds of people who are waving their hands, dancing, doing a whole bunch of stuff. Man, about halfway through the TED Talk, I'll never forget looking out in the audience and no one was moving. There was no energy. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, bruh, I'm failing. This is trash. Like, nobody's really feeling me. Yo, just get through, man. Finish it and just get off the stage. And, you know, I just remember right as I was finishing it, I said, thank you. And I got a standing ovation, right? So, you know, they clapped and then they just kept clapping. Like, it was like awkward how long they kept clapping. And I just remember I got off the stage and I was like, oh, they felt that? That's what's up. You know, and so I learned a lot about myself and dealing with discomfort, pushing through. You know, I had never been that vocally vulnerable ever.
So you just released Wands.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a project process nerd. I like knowing the beginning, middle, and end of what a creative project takes. What was the idea behind that? Also a big fan of like magic and wands. When I was a kid, I would like get sticks and pretend they were wands.
Yeah.
How did that start? What were the ups and downs of it?
Yeah, you know, Wands is a dedication to, you know, I guess like rebuilding myself. So in 2020 and 2021, in April of 2020, I woke up, couldn't feel the left side of my face. And then weeks later, I kind of lost usage of my hands properly, and then it became hard to walk. So I spent most of 2020 kind of rebuilding myself, dealing with a kind of neurological disorder. And then 2020 again, because I kind of relapsed, and and then the real depression hit of like feeling like I'm never going to escape this. I'm never going to get back to who I was, and all of that. So I'm a big like comic book guy, and in the movie, in the comic book Watchmen, there's a character named Dr. Manhattan who gets essentially destroyed in this particle chamber, and he gets ripped apart essentially. But he's the son of a watchmaker and a man who repaired watches, and his father taught him that what is the most important part of fixing or taking apart a watch is putting it back together in the correct order. Right. And so as I was sick, I was just kind of sitting in my then home studio, feeling like I don't know what the rest of my life is going to be like. I watched that movie and I watched that part, and I just thought to myself, like, man, my dad taught me how to put myself back together too. I saw him fall apart, and then I saw him put himself back together. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna put myself back together. And I did a decent job.
Yeah. Let's look
I
around.
did a decent job. Yeah. And Wands is just in the midst of putting myself back together and being an imaginative kind of curious person. I was watching this movie called War of the Worlds, and in the movie, the aliens invade, they're about to take over Earth, and the thing that the aliens didn't prepare for were our microorganisms.
Watch out for the microorganisms.
That's it. Watch out, you know what I'm saying? And the aliens were defeated by the smallest things on the planet. Not any of our nuclear bombs or any of that stuff. Microorganisms is what defeated the aliens. And so, feeling different all my life, and also dealing with a sickness that seemingly no doctor can currently understand, made me wonder, like, wow, what if I'm like this because I'm not from this place? Right? What if I'm an alien and my body has had enough in dealing with Earth and its microorganisms, and it's time for me to go home? Right? And so Wands is the story and the score of me going home.
What does home look like to you, do you think?
So in the story, the thing that I recognize at the end of the story, because I find in the story, I wrote the whole story. In the story, I do find where I'm from. But the trick is that I've been away from there for so long that now the organisms there don't recognize me. So now I'm strange there too. Right? And I think that there's parallels when writing this. There were parallels to like the African American experience, and what it is to be and feel homeless, right? But the final thought in the story of Wands is that I'm an explorer, and that my home is wherever I am, finding, learning, meeting, and exploring. And so even when I decided to do Wands, I changed my name from CEO of Unapologetic to Chief Adventurer and Explorer.
I love that.
So
that's what life's all about, is exploring and learning. And you're talking about you love superheroes and comics, and I have to ask about the mask because I love a performer with a mask.
Yeah.
And you also talked about in your TEDx about being shy and stuttering and relatable. I was curious if like the mask was about leaning into the comic aspect, or is it just like an actual mask to like mask shyness?
Man, So I'll tell you the story of how I first drew it. I spent years in New York as an engineer and producer at Quad Studios in Manhattan. And when I was still in college, I was finishing college still, and I was in a session with Busta Rhymes, and he was not sober, and, and he was ranting about how what Q-Tip told him, in terms of him turning up in his solo career. Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest, and he was saying that the first thing you got to do is find out who you are and what you are, and then he said you got to break the knob, turning that up, and he was just saying like you can't really become who you are, or you can't really blow up in this game until you know who and what you are, and then be able to stand firmly in that. I left that session and went back to my dorm, like, man, who and what am I? Like, what am I gonna turn up? You know what I'm saying? What is my what are my like defining attributes? I had no idea. But generally, when I'm trying to figure something out, I just start drawing, right? And so literally the next day in sociology class, shout out to Mr. Snedeker, you know what I'm saying?
Shout out, Mr. Snedeker.
Yeah. I was in class and I just started drawing, and what I drew was the very first version of the I Make Mad Beats mask. In my mind, that's what I looked like. Like, that was me. And it was focusing on the things that I love to do, that I found the most important things about me, right? Which was just that I make mad beats, and that what I actually look like is not important. Now, with that being said, once I actually got the mask made and I put it on, I did find that when I put it on, I feel like I'm kind of alone in my room and I'm a kid playing around. Like it pulls out this kind of childlike, thing.
Childlike wonder and curiosity.
Absolutely, but at the same time looks kind of intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And so it also acts as a border of like protection, right? And so, I mean, that's the mask. I have many masks, and I enjoy. I don't wear the mask as much as I used to, but I enjoy wearing it.
How do you get them made? Like, what is that process like?
Yeah, when I first decided, because I used to, every time we would do a show, I used to get my face painted. I had a friend who painted my face every time. And then one day I was just like, yo, this gotta be another way. I gotta get a mask. And I was looking at like these companies in and around the country, and I just didn't like what I was looking at. You know what I'm saying? So I just found like there was this company of Venice. They were making Venetian masks.
Fancy.
Yeah. And I liked the way they looked. And I said, yo, can you make me one? But it just says, I make mad beats over and over and over on it. And and it took like 3 weeks to get the first mask made. I still have the picture the guy sent me of him in what looks like a sweatshop of like 50 people making things. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like this old white man who looks like he was like 63 years old. He's wearing an I Make Mad Beats mask. And I was just like, that's the mask.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you're running a fashion line called Garments. What made you want to branch out into fashion?
I kind of just let things come to me. It all started with like, I had a friend named Wade, and Wade pressed up T-shirts. And I can't remember who said it first, but I'm just known for coming up with phrases that only I say, you know what I'm saying? And I just say it over and over and over again, And it might have been my wife. I can't remember. But somebody was like, man, you got to get all these phrases you be saying on T-shirts, So I just hit up my man Wade, and I was like, yo, here's these 10 phrases. Can you put these on T-shirts? He was like, yeah, sure. And one of them was character over everything, right? Which is my dedication to like the idea that I don't have to deal with assholes to survive in the industry. Like I can surround myself with good people with great character. I don't have to, we always feel like he's an asshole, but hey, it's the industry, bro. Nah, I'm good. Y'all over there, I'm good. Somehow I've led a decent career surrounding myself with great people, and I'm going to continue to do that. So that shirt was just kind of dedicated to that idea. And when I wore it, so many people were just like, yo, where'd you get that shirt? And I was like, I just got it made, And then one day I was just like, yo, I should get these pressed up, and like start selling them and just put like unapologetic on the sleeve. And so we did that. I started selling them and people started buying them. And so the general idea for unapologetic was just that like I don't believe the music industry still exists. And the reason why I say that is because music used to be able to live on its own, right? You didn't need a music video, you didn't need any supporting elements, just the music, and the music industry could support musicians. That is no longer the truth. And so to me, it is simply the creative industry.
Yep.
Right? And so all of these things are bleeding into one another now. And, if you walk through my studio, I mean, the first room you walked in was our content creation room. Like, what are we doing if we're not having a space specifically for creating content? Because that's a big part of all things label and all things putting out music, And so the same thing goes for clothing. The same thing goes for merchandise and fashion, right? It's all a part of it. And so I just took that as a sign as like, okay, man, like, let's go ahead and build this whole house, right? All the pieces, right? From having an app to a studio to having a fashion line to putting out short films and scoring them and, all of these things, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's just go ahead and build the house to include everything we need in the house. And so, I grew up wearing like woo wear, you know what I'm saying? And when I would listen to Wu-Tang, I used to love when they would describe it as like, we wear like the freshest garments, you know what I'm saying? There's just something about that word garments that I was just always a cool word to me, and so we just called it unapologetic garments.
I love that. Simple, tells you what it is, but it's also a nod to something you love.
Yeah.
Are there any, like with all things going on with unapologetic, are you currently working on any personal passion projects, any new music or albums?
Yeah, I'm actually finishing off the follow-up to Wands, which is the story of Wands, and it's the audiobook version of it. So what a lot of people don't know is that Wands was actually just the score to an audiobook. I just decided to drop the score first because if you don't do that, people only pay attention to the words. And I'm a musician, so I wanted the score. I wanted y'all to hear the score. You know what I'm saying? And so now we're about to drop the story and all of the things that accompany that. We're formulating things around that. We're about to pop off this planetarium tour. So we dropped Wands, and then we did a huge show at the Museum of Science and History, the planetarium at the Pink Palace. And it was sold out, man. Crazy show. And we're about to take that on the road to planetariums across the country.
Genius.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I'm super excited about that. But then also like unapologetic, in the last year, we've been working with a handful of new artists who are really, gunning to get their stuff out there and take their stuff to the next level. So really excited as a producer. To like usher in and introduce some new ideas and new sounds, new people representing new scary things, that. And then lastly, just to continue to disrupt, to continue to show up in spaces you wouldn't predict.
2 more questions.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of music is?
Man, that's a tough question. I don't know. I will say this though. I say with all things like artificial intelligence and just the way just the way music is kind of evolving in a way that it's making creation accessible to everyone at any moment, you know. I'll just say this, like, you know, just some advice for anybody creating right now and hoping to like build a career in the world of creating. Um, you know, functionality is easier replaced than brand, right? So, like, there are 60 trillion times more people making beats now than there were when I started Unapologetic, right? And having dope drums is easier. Back then, when I started Unapologetic, I had the greatest drums of all time, and my vault was so deep it was hard to compete. You know what I'm saying? But now with a subscription to Splice, like, you have you have a whole bunch of drums, you know, at your fingertips, and a whole bunch of dope samples, a whole bunch of things that mean you don't necessarily have to know music theory as well as maybe you would have had to, and blah 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 blah. You know, all of that is in play. You are hard to replace when you stand for something, when you're an idea.
Yes.
Right? And that's one thing that I think I'm proud of, is that I Make Mad Beats as an idea. Like, there's an idea to Mad Beats. There are things that I stand for that make people and companies reach out to me, whether it's for music or for my ideas, that are beyond my simple ability to put a kick snare and a hi-hat in order, and a bass line and a piano, right? Like, saying that it is produced by I Make Mad Beats has a meaning to it, right? And that's the thing that I would tell all creators to focus on, is like, make it so that when people reach out to you, that they're buying into the why of you. But you have to know the why of you first. You can't tell a story you don't know, right? And you can't people to buy into a story you can't tell, you know. And so do the due diligence. Even if you're a producer and you're like, I'm not a vocalist, I'm not a rapper, I'm not a singer, still have an idea to you. Stand for something.
That aligns very well, because I'm reading Start With Why. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I lied. I actually have two more questions.
Okay.
So what do you stand for? What is your belief? What is your why?
Man, I want to just read the mission statement for Unapologetic.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can read it. It's up there. In this place, our differences are valued and celebrated. We are underneath the umbrella of individuality. Here is where vulnerability becomes art and weird becomes genius. I mean, there's a lot more in the mission statement, but I think that covers most of it, where it's just like, where vulnerability becomes art and weird becomes genius. You know, I'm about the idea that I could never get and ask and demand and command what is for me if I cannot explain and display who and what I am.
Yes.
Right? And I have to be unashamed and unafraid to do that. Right? And I have to lean into the idea that if I do that, you'll see more of yourself in me than you thought.
I love that. My favorite question to ask artists and to close out is, if you had all the time, all the resources, what would be your dream project?
Man, my dream project? It would be, I would want to score Kill Bill 3.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Quentin,
yeah.
call him.
I'll let your boy, you know what I'm saying?
Please. I got to hear that. I want to thank you so much for talking with me. I look up to you so much.
Oh, man,
you're the blueprint, and like, you're truly making a movement, and it's so inspiring to see. So thanks so much for being creative.
Man, thank you for having me. Thank you for creating platforms like this. Like, as soon as I saw it on Instagram, I was just like, yes, we need this.
Yes.
And so I'm honored to be on here.
Well, cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.